Welcome. On behalf of the Oblate School of Theology in San Antonio, Texas, and of the Kusenberger Chair of Oblate Studies based in San Antonio, but at the service of the Mazanodian family throughout the world, I'm Father Frank Santucci, a missionary oblate of Mary Immaculate, and I'm happy to be your guide to accompany you during these various presentations. We have entitled this series, Eugene de Mazenod, Daring to Listen to God's Call. And this man dared. This man had the courage to listen to God's call. But we begin today with a section on his youth, seeing how the foundation was laid in his world, in his family, in his character, and in his experiences. And in this way, on this foundation, was built this daring that has achieved so much in his lifetime and in the past 200 years. In this series, we will be exploring the historical background, the life, the charism, the spirituality, and mission of Saint Eugene de Mazenod. The historical background is important because he was born in 1782 under the Ancien regime, and in his nearly 80 years of life, he went through a number of regime changes: the French Revolution, Napoleon, the restoration of the monarchy, the 1830 Revolution, the 1848 Revolution, through to his death. And each one of these events influenced him. And his life, his charism, his spirituality, his mission was in response to the historical situation, to the events around him. He was born under the Ancien regime. Here we see King Louis XVI and his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette. And they were at the top of the pyramid. The king was anointed, and he was regarded as being God's representative on this earth. And under him, you could see a pyramid: the church, the nobility, and the third estate. And looking at that picture, it looks very idyllic, but the situation was hardly like that. It looked more like this. The third estate, which was the biggest part of the population of France, was like this man bent over with the monarchy, the nobility, and the church on his back, weighing him down. And the French Revolution could be seen in terms of the third estate, that man standing up and throwing the nobility and the church off his back. The church was made up of 1% of the population. The nobility were also 1% of the population, and they owned 20% of the land. And the 98% of the population were known as the third estate, made up of the bourgeoisie, who were your wealthy middle class, your merchants, your lawyers, your artisans, then city workers, and the peasants. The peasants formed the vast majority of the people in the countryside under very harsh conditions. All this was a system based on privilege, on lordship. The nobility were the ones who had the authority. And Eugene de Mazenod's father was one of these. He belonged to the nobility. He was a lord. And it is in this context that Eugene was born in 1782. And for the first 9 years of his life, he lived as a nobleman, as a member of the privileged class. But all this came to an end in 1789 with the outbreak of the revolution. A good theme for exploring Eugene's childhood is the quote, "The child is father of the man." And we see in the traits of this youngster the traits that he would use in later life. The picture that we're looking at is the first and the only portrait that we have of Eugene as a child, 5 years old, very much the nobleman. And this was the man who was destined to be the founder of the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, who was destined to be the Bishop of Marseille, and who was destined to be a saint of the Universal Church. He was born within this historical context in the city of Aix-en-Provence in the south of France, where the red dot is. It is an area that is colorful, beautiful flowers, beautiful colors that you can see in the spring and in the summer. An area of artists and musicians, an area of people who are colorful and who do express themselves. The large picture is of the Cour, today known as the Cour Mirabeau, which is the street on which Eugene was born and lived. And we have here the baptismal font and a photograph of his baptismal certificate. But what is interesting is how his pedigree comes out in this. Charles Joseph Eugene de Mazenod, that was his full name, son of Monsieur Charles Antoine de Mazenod, president of the Court of Accounts, Aids and Finances of the country of Provence. So the father was a nobleman and he had a high position. And he was the son, Eugene was the son of Madame Marie-Rose Eugénie de Joannis, his wife. And he was born yesterday and baptized the second day of the month of August 1782 by the undersigned, the curé. Then the godfather, Monsieur Joseph Thomas de Joannis, royal professor of medicine, the maternal grandfather. And the godmother, Lady Eugénie Françoise d'Antoine, wife of Augustin François de l'Évêque, honorary president of the above-mentioned court. Not bad as a baptism certificate, and not bad as a certificate of the pedigree of this youngster. In Aix-en-Provence, we have the cemetery in which the members of the family were buried. And here again, it is interesting. Eugene is put down there as right under the name of his maternal grandmother, to whom he was very close. And then you have his name, the name of his father, who was a judge and who was a nobleman, the name of his mother, Marie-Rose, of his sister, Eugénie, whom he called affectionately Ninette, and of her generation. She was the one who married, and her children have carried on the name, not Mazenod, but Boisgelin. Eugene was passionate about his family, and he wrote many years later, "I have not changed over the years. I idolize my family. I would let myself be cut up into little pieces for some members of my family, and that stretches out to quite a long way. For I will give my life without hesitation for my father, mother, grandmother, my sister, and my father's 2 brothers. Generally speaking, I love with passion everybody I believe loves me. But theirs must be a passionate love too." And this is a passionate love that continued throughout his life. A passionate love for his family. Very much aware of the values of the noble class. His father, and those are the coat of arms of the father, was a figure in Aix. He was a brilliant lawyer. He was the president of the Court of Finances. And as a result of this, Eugene appreciated the value of the law, and he was able to use his appreciation of the law in later life, particularly in bringing about the statutes, the rule of the missionary oblates of Mary Immaculate. From his father, who was called the president of the Court of Finances, and from his mother and his mother's family, he learned a great appreciation for finance and how it worked. And this was to serve him in good stead when he was Bishop of Marseille. A youngster who grew up with a sense of justice, a sense that, again, he would put into practice as a missionary oblate of Mary Immaculate. Some examples where he recounts this. He writes in the third person about himself. From his tenderest years he had a great sense of justice and love for the truth that rendered him incapable of the least lie. So, when he was at fault, he never made excuses, still less did he conceal his wrongdoing. He did not cry for what he wanted. Rather, he showed himself to be willful, but he would always respond to reason. He would have recoiled at punishment, especially if he did not think it deserved. Besides, he did not behave in such a way as to incur it. His sense of justice did not allow him to be passive when others were subject to the slightest unjustified accusation. A quality that we will see later on in life when he became the missionary to the most abandoned. That's the house in which he was born. A house in which 4 adults lived, and they had 12 servants. And so they lived very much beyond their means. And this is why his father needed to marry into money. Speaking about himself again, he wrote, "I am a lively and impetuous type of character. When I want something, I want it very badly. I am impatient of the least hold-up, and I find delays unbearable. Firm in my resolutions, I rebel against anything that gets in the way of carrying them out. And I would not let anything stand in my way to overcome even the most difficult obstacle. Obstinate in my desires and feelings, I rebel at the mere hint of opposition. If it persists, and unless I am really sure that I am being opposed for a higher good. As a child, when I wanted something, I did not beg or wheedle or cajole. I called for what I wanted in an imperious tone, as if I had a right to it. If I was refused, I would not cry." Strong-willed, a sense of leadership, capable of relating to all. He recalls, "It was quite normal for me to give away my breakfast even when I was hungry, to satisfy the hunger of the poor. I used to bring firewood to people who complained of the cold and of not being able to afford to buy it. On one occasion I went as far as to give away the clothes off my back to clothe a poor person, and many, many other stories in the same vein." And that's the street on which he grew up. When I was 4, one of my uncles brought me to the theatre. I was annoyed at the noise that they were making down below. I am told that standing on tiptoe to find out where the noise was coming from, I sharply addressed the whole audience down below with these words, spoken in a tone that brought an explosion of laughter from all in the box. "Tout are se descendi. Just you wait if I have to come down there." And that's at the age of 4. He learned to speak the Provençal language through the domestics that were in his home. And because he was close to the Provençal people, he was familiar with their local customs. And he would use these customs later on in his missionary preaching. That is the school that he went to, where he was educated for the first couple of years of his life. He showed himself to be compassionate, with an empathy for those who suffered. And again, another example, written by him, but in the third person. One day, Eugene went into a lawyer's house and was surprised to see that there was no fire. "Why," he said to the family, "don't you have any heating today, although it is really cold?" The ladies answered, teasing him. The child was not yet 6 years old. "Because we are poor and wood is expensive." Eugene said goodbye and left. An hour later, he is seen pushing along with some difficulty a little cart, loaded up with branches, that he drops briskly outside their doors, saying, "Now then, here's something to warm you up." You can imagine the whole family's feelings confronted with this sign of goodness. Several of its members used to tell it still 30 years later with tears in their eyes. And so the sense of being compassionate, the empathy for those who suffered, was strongly from his childhood. And then, very important, a sense of the presence of God. Once again, looking back when he was 28 years old, he wrote, "God placed in me, I would almost say, a kind of instinct to love him. My reason was not yet formed when I loved to dwell in his presence, to raise my feeble hands to him, listen to his word in silence as if I understood it. By nature lively and irrepressible, it was enough to bring me before the altar to make me gentle and utterly tranquil. So ravished was I by my God's perfections, as if by instinct I would say, for at that age I did not understand them." And the sense of the presence of God lasted throughout his life. And so with those qualities, strong-willed in leadership, a sense of justice, compassion and empathy for the suffering, a passionate love for his family, his knowledge of the Provençal language and respect for folklore, his sense of the presence of God, how comfortable he was in all social relations, and this financial and legal background. All these areas, all these aspects of his personality and his experience were to be developed and to be a foundation that made him a priest, a founder of a missionary congregation, a bishop, and finally understood to be a saint, recognized as a saint by the Universal Church. The child was indeed father of the man.